Hey everybody, Logan from the Armor Range Model Works here again. Today we're going to be taking a look, mid-build progress on the Takom T30, T34 kit and the Takom T29E3 kit. These are American heavy tank prototypes that were started in March of 1944. These were meant to be direct counters to the German King Tiger and later Soviet heavy armor. These represent a pretty big shift in American armor design, as opposed to like the Sherman, which was originally meant to be an infantry support tank. These are direct armor combat vehicles, tank-on-tank engagements. That's what these were designed for. Very heavily armored, very heavily armed, very, very big tanks, especially in comparison to the Sherman. So a little bit of history here on the vehicles and kind of a little bit of what they entail. Like I said, the program started March 1944, Detroit Arsenal. 6-man crews as opposed to 5 in the Sherman. The driver and bow gunner retain their same positions. The difference is there was one gunner down here on the starboard front in the turret, just like on the Sherman or the Pershing. The commander was moved to the rear of the turret, and 2 loaders were placed on one on either side of the gun breech. This was due to either two-part ammunition or very large ammunition in the case of the 105 millimeter. 141,000 pounds was the combat load of these vehicles, 70 tons. More than a match for the King Tiger, especially with the frontal armor on them, which we'll get to here right now. The gun mantlet. Well, I'll start with the hull first, actually. The front hull would have been 4 inches, which isn't bad considering it's pretty well sloped too, just like the front of a King Tiger would be. But the front of the turret was 9 inches at its thickest, and the gun mantlet was 11 inches thick. So you have to be going through 20 inches of armor plate to get through the front of the turret on one of these things. Which, when you consider that, even 4 inches is pretty substantial when sloped. 20 inches, especially if this thing is behind an embankment where all you see is the turret, you're going to have a pretty rough day trying to get through this thing. So, alright. Something to note before I get too involved here. The decals on these vehicles are not from the kit. I'm just warning you now. The muzzle brake on the T29 is not from the kit. We'll get to that in a minute. The battle damage that's on the T29 is also not represented in the kit. That's work done by me. What else? The antennas are not from the kit. And as I said, the decals aren't from the kit. Oh, and this the additional armor plate on the front here isn't from the kit, but like I said, I'll get to that later in the video. So the kit right out of the box builds a basic factory stock T29 or a T30 or T34, depending on which kit you get. Now, the guns on these tanks, on the T29, it's high velocity 105 millimeter main gun. The T34 is the 120 millimeter main gun, which is what this has on it right here. And the T30, which was originally what I started building this tank has a 155 millimeter main gun. Now, it has the 120 millimeter gun on it right now because I discovered that the 155 millimeter main gun from the kit is a bit too small. It's a little under scale. I can show you what I mean by that right now. If you look here, the outside diameter of the gun tube is about the same, if not maybe even a hair smaller than the 120 millimeter main gun. Now, 155 millimeter main gun, you'd think the outside of the tube would be a lot bigger than a 120 millimeter tube. But, yeah. So I pulled the 155 millimeter off and just went with the 120. Kind of like what's on the box art here. I also put the armor plate on the back. Now, as far as aftermarket options for barrels are concerned, I was talking to a friend of mine, Brian Jones, and he worked out a way to have an aftermarket barrel for each one of these kits. One of those is actually a way to correct the too small 155mm gun. He's actually building the T29E3, the T30, the T34, and he's kit bashing a standard T29E1 without the rangefinders on the turret. So for the 105mm gun on the T29, your option for a metal barrel would be find somebody that has a T95 kit, or maybe you have one in your stash, the Dragon T95. It comes with the metal 105mm barrel and 205mm muzzle brakes. That's where the muzzle brakes came from, or muzzle brake came from for this one here. The gun halves themselves and the kits go together very well for the 105. The only thing I didn't like about it is the threads that were on the end of the barrel were a bit soft. They weren't very well defined. I didn't really feel like trying to take a file and sharpening the threads up because I figured I would mess it up, and I didn't really want to do that. So I dug through my Dragon T28 kit. I grabbed the spare 105mm muzzle brake. I cut the threads off the barrel and installed the muzzle brake. In my personal opinion, it looks a little better with a muzzle brake anyway. But I have plans to build a couple more of these, so I'm sure I'll have one here soon that doesn't have the muzzle brake on it. But the 120mm main gun for the T34, if you want a metal barrel option, pretty much your only option is to go with a M103 barrel from, I think, A-Bear and RB Model, both make them. But the 120mm gun for the M103 was developed from this gun. The M103 gun is a little bit longer than this one is, but as well as some other actual performance differences. But externally, the gun looks pretty close to the same, other than the M103 muzzle brake is a bit different. If you notice on the box art here, there appears to be the canvas cover actually seems to come down the barrel. And on the real vehicle, there was actually a sleeve, very similar to like a Tiger 1 here. There's the tube sleeve that comes up here that the gun recoils into. There was a sleeve just like that I believe was mounted to the mantlet, and that's what the canvas cover would mount to. So it's not wrong to display it without that tube if you go with the uncovered option, but you know, it's something to be aware of. There are pictures out there of these vehicles without the canvas cover on. They're just pretty difficult to find where they actually have that tube on there. I've only seen one picture like that, but you know, be aware. The 120mm, or excuse me, I went over the 155 being a little too small out of the kit box. The only option for the 155 out of the kit is the uncovered version. The 120mm barrel actually has two options. You can do the covered or uncovered version, and I was a little skeptical of the covered mantlet just because I had heard it was multiple pieces of plastic, and I figured the seams would be absolutely horrendous. But looking at them, after assembling this, I assembled the T29 one too. The T29 comes with the option of a covered and uncovered mantlet. I went with the uncovered version just because it's my personal preference. I did assemble the covered mantlets though, and they actually are pretty nice. The cleanup realistically would be pretty minimal. You can't even really see the seam on the bottom there. I mean, you can kind of see where I sanded it because I went a little overboard, but the cleanup would be pretty easy and minimal on those seams. So with painting and a wash, you could probably almost pass them off as sewing seams. But the muzzle brakes are actually separate pieces too. This isn't molded as just two pieces and glue it together. But Brian Jones also worked out a way to fix the 155mm gun barrel. And I happen to have that barrel here that he used to do that. RB Model makes a metal barrel for the German 17cm Geschutzwagen, self-propelled gun. This is the front section of that, and to fit for the 155, it works essentially perfectly. Lengthwise, it's about perfect, but it's a bit bigger around and gives it that, you know, kind of big beefiness that you really need to have to represent a 155 millimeter gun. I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe he cut the threads off the metal barrel and just glued this into place, but don't quote me on that. He's been a great help on these as far as finding reference photos and stuff. So, all right, moving on. Kit barrels. The overall, though, before I get too carried away here, the kit barrels actually aren't bad on the T29. I mean, if you're just going for a box stock build, it'll work just fine. You don't need a replacement barrel for it. The 120 millimeter barrel, both 120 millimeter barrels actually on the T34 kit are excellent. The 155 millimeter barrel, if you're not worried about, you know, kind of how big around it is, it's not that big of a deal, and it goes together very nicely too. So the suspension is all torsion bar suspension. If you're familiar with the Pershing, they're a very similar looking tank, and that's because the T29 hull was simply a lengthened Pershing hull. A lot of the suspension is nearly identical. There's just more of it. Let's see. There are 9 road wheels per side. Shock absorbers on the front 3 and the rear 2 road wheels. And the linked bar assembly that's on the front suspension of a Pershing is the same on the T29 and the T30, T34 as well. 7 return rollers up on the top. I don't have those in right now. I have to pull the tracks back off for weathering purposes on the T29, so I didn't bother putting the return rollers in. But you get a feel there for what it looks like underneath. The suspension assembly is well detailed and it's pretty straightforward. Everything fits together fairly snugly. You don't have to wrestle with it as far as parts fitting too sloppy or too loose. The track jig actually works to align the suspension as well, and that's the only thing I used it for, which we'll get to that in a little bit. I went over and detailed the suspension on the T29 a little bit more. I added nut and bolt heads to the shock absorbers. It's not something that's totally necessary, but it's something that I know is there. The differences between the T30 and the T29 hull are, in the front, they're pretty minimal, negligible. But if you look at the rear, the engine decks are substantially different. I can get the turrets to cooperate here. The T30 has this kind of bridge pipe over the top here out to the exhausts. The T29 has exhausts that the pipes just come out of the side of the hull here on the top. And the engine grates are different on both of them as well. The gun travel locks are workable. I didn't break this one off, but they just kind of press into place. Come on. And they're workable if you want to spin the guns around and put them in a stowed position. This T30, well, T34 will be on a dragon wagon when it's done. The road wheels here, as you can see, aren't painted. This one is just base coated and started decals. This one here is actually ready for weathering to begin. The tracks are Lincoln length. I would honestly rather have these be a complete set of rubber bands or a complete set of individual links. The Lincoln length tracks are not bad, but I personally would not recommend using the jig to assemble them. Mine I found to be a little bit too sloppy. There's a little too much room in there, and it actually put a lot of slack on the front road wheel there. But it's not bad. I took mine and just assembled them the way that you normally would Lincoln links or individual links. Just laid them out, put the glue on them, let it start to set, and then wrap it around and set your tension and just let them dry and harden up. Moving up to the turret. The turret on both kits they're absolutely excellent. The fit is great. The detail is great. The cast texture right out of the box is pretty good. I prefer a little bit rougher cast texture just because I have a really bad habit of kind of laying paint on a little too thick, and I tend to bury details a little bit. So I took Thin to Me a putty and kind of added a little bit rougher texture to it, but it's not 100% necessary by any means. That's just a matter of personal preference. The kit texture is great. I wonder if you can kind of see some of it on the hull here, because I didn't change it on the hull. It's nice and subtle. I ended up not messing up the paint, which is rare for me, but I'm trying out some new paints and it's working pretty good. But we'll get to those in a later video. So the fit, as far as how they actually went together, one second here. Let me prop this one up here and I will show you. Sorry, I'm a little bit unprepared here, but alright. The fit. The turret joins right here along this kind of cast seam. I don't know if you can tell that that's where it goes together, but I didn't have to do any filling, no real sanding worth note. I just kind of glued them together, pressed them together, and kind of scraped the seam. They fit absolutely excellent. There is a little bit of a mold seam that I kind of missed up here, like right along there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I ended up not going back over and getting rid of it. I think it just kind of works nicely. It almost seems like kind of a cast seam, but the battle damage is not part of the turret. That was something I added, so don't have to worry about that. The upper detail is pretty nice. The only thing I wish they would have done a little different on the upper detail, okay, two things, excuse me, is I wish they would have made it where you could open the gunner's periscope here. But not a deal breaker by any means. But a pretty big bummer is that you cannot model the rangefinders open right out of the box. You actually are going to have to scratch build that, which I have planned for a later build of one of these. So, I also modified the machine gun mount here to where you can have it up or down, because I wanted it down for this build, because I planned on mounting the 50 caliber machine gun on the back of the turret. There is a stowage system for the back of the turret for the machine gun. It mounts on the pedestal right there, and then the heat shield goes into this here, and that's where it just kind of rides on the back of the turret. The differences in the turret, obviously apart from the big rangefinders, the T29E3, which is this version here, was the only one that had hatches in different positions. The two loader's hatches had to be relocated due to the casting for the large rangefinder that ran all the way across the turret. So, which is accurately represented in here. And they also have, it's kind of hard to see because of the olive drab paint, but you can see that this was actually a completely different casting than the T30 and T34 turrets were, because these were cast as the outside of the turret and then had the roofs welded on, whereas the T29 turret was cast as all one piece. This was all cast into the original casting of the turret. This was not a cut everything out and re-weld it back in. So the periscopes are clear. All the periscopes, the drivers, the bow gunners. The commander's periscope up here in the hatch is clear, as well as the whole commander's cupola being clear, just like on the Tasca or Azuka Shermans. All you do is mask off the view block here, and then paint everything around. The inside of the hatches will be painted white, and the periscope will be painted by hand. The kits both come with metal tow cables, which is pretty nice. 2 of them per kit. And they're actually of a long enough length to be a believable tow cable. I know Dragon has a tendency to kind of give you ones that are a little bit too short. Even though they're one of my favorite manufacturers, that's one gripe I'd always had about Dragon. But Takom gives you a nice full-length twisted tow cable, and I believe these are aluminum. They're actually pretty easy to manipulate, so not too stiff. You'll actually be able to drape them over realistically on the vehicle. The decal sheet that comes with the kit is it's actually pretty Spartan. It's there's not a picture of it on the box, but all it contains is a serial number, this star that's on the back of the turret here, and the number 35. The decal sheets and identification are identical for both tanks. So you might have to outsource your own decals like I did for mine. Like these are from Tamiya and Dragon kits. So just something to be aware of. Recommendations for aftermarket parts. There isn't a whole heck of a lot you're going to need for it, but in my personal opinion, I would recommend replacing the M250 caliber machine gun that comes in these kits. It's not terrible. If you drill the barrel out, it's pretty decent. I mean, it'll be alright if you paint it up nice. But that's one thing I don't like to skimp on American vehicles is the M250 caliber machine gun, because it's one of those things where it's an iconic weapon, part of the vehicle, and honestly, it's an M250 caliber machine gun. It's always going to be a focal point, no matter how big of a build you have. Someone's going to look at that M250 caliber machine gun and go, oh, the rest of the tank looks great, but the machine gun's a little soft in detail. So be aware of that. The antennas, I highly recommend getting some aftermarket antennas. I mean, you can find these things for like $4 on eBay. These ones I actually got as a gift from a friend in Poland. I ordered some Frill model tracks from him. I overpaid a little bit for shipping, so he sent them in to make up for the shipping costs. So those are 2-meter antennas, 6 feet antennas, and they work great for this. They're not too big, they're not too short. The kit does have the mounts that go on the back of the turret there, but no antennas. I mean, you could also build your own out of stretch sprue, but no antennas. One thing that was kind of a bummer is there's no stowage or crew members included in these kits, which is it's a bit of a bummer in my opinion. It does have the it has the Pioneer tools and stuff as you'd expect, but no stowage at all. No jerry cans, no tarps, none of that. I have some tank crewmen from Mini Art that I'm going to use for these probably. Maybe order some resin stuff off eBay. As far as stowage goes, I'm just going to raid the spares box and kind of throw some stuff on there. These vehicles aren't going to be weathered up too much. These are going to be they've only been in service a few months kind of thing. So that's why I tried to tone it down a little bit with the battle damage I added to the T29. I didn't want to go too overboard. But also of note, I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but the decals that are on this vehicle did not come with this kit. My introduction to the T29 was playing World of Tanks a couple years ago. So I went online and I found a World of Tanks decal sheet to get the lead magnet name and the crossed mesas. Those were the emblems I used on my T29 when I played the game. So just so you don't think that comes with the kit, I have to throw that out there. The pluses with the kit as a whole, the cast detail is great, but mostly the thing I was most excited about is the engineering and the overall fit. Everything goes together excellently. There's really nothing you have to fight with. I mean, the tracks can be a little bit of a bear if you're not really experienced with link and length tracks, but honestly, if you've ever put together a full set of individual plastic link tracks, you'll be able to do these absolutely no problem whatsoever. And if you wish to add kind of a worn look to them, it's pretty easy to cut the cleats off the sides. But overall, the engineering is great. Moving on to the cons. I know I was just talking about the tracks, but they're kind of one of the cons in my book. I really wish that it would have had either individual link tracks or just straight rubber band tracks. Maybe Dragon DS style, or I don't really want to say full model because I really don't want to pay $45 to $50 for a set of aftermarket tracks for an American vehicle. The reason I say that is because I love full model tracks for German and Soviet subjects. I really, really do. But the difference is on an American vehicle where it has tension track, live track, you don't need full model tracks because you don't have the sag in them that you do in like a German vehicle like a Tiger. You don't need sag like that on a T29 or a Sherman. So hopefully AFE Club or somebody like that, maybe even Trumpeter, will come out with a workable set. That would be a huge benefit to us that want to use it in a diorama setting. You really can't manipulate the suspension with link and length tracks, at least not very easily, and I really don't want to mess up the tracks for this, because if you do, you're essentially screwed, because there's no aftermarket options available for tracks for these right now. So what you have in the kit is your only option. The M250 caliber machine gun is a little bit of a bummer, like I mentioned, but it's not the end of the world. No stowage or crew is... I don't want to say it's a deal breaker. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it would have been nice to at least have a commander figure with these, just to kind of give it a sense of scale. Because these tanks are a lot bigger than you might realize, compared to a 1/35th scale crew member here, trying to help his buddy out of the hatch. Even though he's German, just to give you a look at how big this tank really is. It's a very large vehicle, so I believe the length from the end of the barrel to the back of the tank was like 37 feet, so pretty good sized vehicle indeed. Another last thing on the cons list, I guess, is the jig for the tracks is a poor fit. Not really the end of the world. Like I said, if you're experienced with individual length tracks or link and length tracks, it really shouldn't be that big of an issue for you. All I did with mine is I just didn't use the jig. I just put them together kind of like you do with regular individual links. Just glue them and wrap them around, let them sit, let them dry. Who do I recommend this kit to? The box says ages 14 and older, and I think they're pretty close on that mark. If you're 11, 12, 13 years old and you've got a couple years of model building under your belt, you could probably tackle one of these. You might need some help from a little more experienced modeler on the tracks, but Takom's pretty spot on the 14 and up. But even if you're an experienced modeler, I think you'll have a great time building this kit, because it's, as much as I caution myself on saying it, other than the tracks, it's pretty much like a Tamiya kit, where you cut the parts loose, throw them in the box, shake the box, and it puts itself together. The fit is really that good. So, overall, a rating on a scale of 10, 10 being the best, I'd give this probably about a 9. Like I said, a couple more options would have been really nice. Like being able to have the rangefinder doors open would have been a really, really nice touch, really useful touch. Link and length tracks were probably... I don't want to complain about them because they are well done for the most part. They're a tiny bit soft on detail on the end connectors and stuff, but not that big of a deal. But I feel that individual link tracks or rubber bands would have been a much better choice for this vehicle. If you would have had a little more option on how to display it, and a little bit better M250 caliber machine gun and the change tracks, it would honestly be a perfect 10 out of 10. Other than maybe the barrel issue with 155, but I can overlook that. Everyone makes their mistakes in kits. There's no such thing as a 100% perfect model kit. So price versus value, honestly, I gotta give this one a perfect 10 on that. You can find these kits for about $40 online. Considering how big of a tank this really is, like compared to an old Sherman hull I have here, just a weathering test bed hull. I mean, this thing is time and a half the size of a Sherman. The turret is time and a half the size of a Tiger turret. So it's a very big kit for the amount of money you have to spend on it. And realistically, it's a great fitting kit. And it really does look nice on the shelf next to other subjects. It's kind of breaking the mold a little bit. You're getting something new, getting something big, something that's going to draw attention. And it's overall a really, really fun kit to build. So I can't really complain much about it at all. But yeah, feel free to comment below. Let me know what you thought of this. Like I said, I'm fairly new to making videos like this for YouTube, and hopefully here soon I can get a tripod for the phone camera and the video quality will improve a little bit. But for now, this is kind of what I got. If you have any suggestions on how to improve the videos, things you want to know about the kit that I might have missed, please feel free to comment below. What else was I going to say here? Any suggestions on future subjects you would like to see, also please comment below. And I think that will just about do it. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell notification button so you get updates as I post these videos. I'm going to try to do a couple more inbox reviews tonight and try to get them posted, but no promises. Please feel free to share the page on social media, kind of get the word out. This page is meant to be a page by a modeler for the modelers. So all of my kits come from my own personal dime. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I don't get free handouts. So when I buy kits, I expect them to be a decent kit, and I have no problem calling out bad quality on a model. So like I said, thank you very much for supporting the channel. Thank you very much for stopping by. Please feel free to share it and get the word out, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.